Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to How to Get Hired. I am Bill, the company's expert. Yeah, that's right. It's me again. That would make anyone happy. Thank you for being here. I mean that sincerely. This is the weekly live stream where we talk about job search, how to get hired, how to do job interviews, how to do job applications, how to negotiate offers, all that kind of stuff. It's all good. Networking, anything involved with careers and job search. It's all good. And this is an interactive Q&A, like I was saying. So if you're seeing my beautiful face right now, you should see a chat box somewhere in the vicinity. Get in the chat box. Let me know what you're wondering about, what you're struggling with, and I will do my best to help you out. That's what the point of this is. Rather hectic thing. I had to get my stuff together very quickly. There's some practical difficulties in doing YouTube part-time. You got to sort of maintain your commitments on when you said you were going to be live. So sometimes you got to jump through some hoops, but that's okay because there's 15 people here. Silver Evans is here, says, "Hey, Mr. Bill, what's up? I'm doing fine. Not too much. Just the usual hectic lifestyle that I lead, and as I'm sure a lot of you guys do too." The title of today's episode is, "Why do you want to work here? Best answer." That's what we're going to be covering. This is episode 122 of How to Get Hired. So we're going to be answering that question. And as always, shout out goes out to my YouTube channel members, my Patreons, my super thanks donors, and to all my participants. That means you. Thank you for being here. This is hopefully to talk about whatever you guys want. So we're going to kick things off by talking about the title, the best answer to the job interview question, why do you want to work here? Okay. And then hopefully by the time we're done this, the questions will be rolling in so that we can just address those. Okay. So this is one of the relatively common job interview questions. It falls under the same category that a lot of these questions fall into, which, it's rather unintuitive if you haven't done research on how to do a job interview, because if you just took the words at face value, it seems self-evident. They're saying, why do you want to work here? It's like, duh, because I need a job, right? That's what it feels like, but that's not what they're asking. Okay, that's the first thing everyone needs to know, especially if you're new at this. They're not actually asking why you need a job. What they're asking is, why do you specifically want to work here, right? Maybe you applied to hundreds of jobs in your job search campaign and you got a couple of interviews, and this is one of them, right? And you come down there, or you do it remotely, which is increasingly common these days, and they ask you, why do you want to work here? And what they're asking you is, what is it about our company or our organization that made you want to apply for this, right? And a lot of times, if you haven't thought about this in advance, you might be like, I don't know, you guys were the first ones to respond, which would be a terrible answer, by the way. Okay, so just so everybody's clear on what they're actually asking here, they're saying, why us? Okay, and if you say, I don't know, that's bad, okay? Okay, so you don't say because I need a job, because I, don't want to starve, all those kind of answers. Those are all bad, very bad answers. They can probably eliminate you just on the strength of that, okay? The other things these smart ass answers I've heard are like, well, you should say, why should I work here? It's like, no, you shouldn't, right? These are all stupid. Okay. Basically what this question is they're looking for proof that you've researched this employer. That's what the question's about. Do you know who we are? First of all, do you know who we are? Do you know what we do? And then hopefully the answer is yes. And then assuming that, why would you want to work here? Why would you want to work for us specifically? Right. So in order to answer that, you'd have to have done some research on this employer. Usually that involves 2 minutes with Google or ChatGPT or some other resource like that online. Okay. And then the other thing they're looking for is, apart from proof that you've taken the effort to spend 2 minutes looking up this employer. But the other thing they're looking for is an overt display of passion, right? Because you might know about the employer, but you really don't give a rat's ass about working for them. That's how you honestly feel. And if that translates, that also could be something that eliminates you. They're not looking for people that just need a job. Because a lot of applicants apply to these things, they're looking for someone who passionately, specifically wants to work for them. Now, maybe that's a tall order, but that's what they're looking for anyway. So in order to pass this question, you've got to sort of convince them on some level that there's a certain amount of interest on your part to work for them. Okay, so those are kind of the two things they're looking for. Have you done the research? Do you want to work here? Like, do you have passion to do this work or to work with them? Okay. This is all based on a lot of modern recruitment and selection theory that the candidate that has the most interest in the job tends to work out, has the highest likelihood of working out, right? So they're looking for that interest. They're looking for signals that you are interested. Okay. One of those would be all about the company, right? Okay. And it's also based on, I'm not sure where this comes from, if there's actually data behind this, but nevertheless, this is taught as a principle to recruiters, is that the person that's most interested in the role and the employer will likely stay the longest. Okay, so I don't know where that comes from, if that's data driven or that's just something that somebody thought up, on their third bottle of whiskey. I'm not sure, but that's the theory that drives them asking questions like this. Okay. So basically they're looking for flattery, but not flattery for them personally. They're looking for flattery for their organization. So for example, you would say, oh, I know all about you guys. You guys are the leading provider of, data center solutions or, whatever, or you're the leading provider of welding services to the marine industry, I don't know, whatever it is. So it shows that you know what you're talking about. It shows that you understand what's great about them as an organization, right? Or about the work they do in this role. You could maybe turn it around and say, well, in this role, this is what it involves, and I'm passionate about doing that. I know you guys do that. You're obviously hiring, for someone in that role, and I know all about the role, and I know that you guys, use a lot of people like that. So that's why I'm here. I think this is a fantastic opportunity to do this kind of work, which, is really, really cool. Something like that, right? Okay, and the whole point that you need to do here, as far as I'm concerned, is basically convince them that you want the job. You actively want it. You don't want a job, you want this job, right? That's what they're looking for. And that's what I recommend that you show directly or indirectly when you answer this. Okay, now, just as an aside, we've talked before, and I've done videos before, it's a common kind of thing that's out there, hopefully you guys know this, is that you get bonus points in a job interview if at some point you indicate to them that you want the job. You say, I want this job. Okay, you don't have to use those exact words, but that's the sentiment that you convey. Okay? If you do that, recruiters generally really like that. Okay? Now, oh, and by the way, you don't say it in a desperate way, like I need money, I want this job. No, you say it in an inspired way. Like, wow, this is so cool. This is a tremendous opportunity. I want this job. Something like that, right? That's what they're looking for. That signals that you might be the right person for this in their mind, okay? What else can I say about this, really? You're motivated to do this specific job. That suggests you would be satisfied being in the role, right? That's the connection they're making. That's why this carries weight with them. Now, if you can back this up with evidence of some kind, with stories or, your background, something like that, to say, look, I like this work for this reason, okay? I have this personality, I have these skills, I have this education. Those combine to make me really good at this kind of activity. And this role involves a lot of that type of activity. It involves someone who would be doing that kind of thing most of the time, and for me, that works out really well because I enjoy doing that. Now, as you can maybe see in my track record here, I have been in those types of jobs for quite a few years, and I've stayed in those jobs because I enjoy doing it. I feel that I have a particular talent for it, and as far as I can tell, this role involves doing that kind of work. So, I think it seems like certainly it's a great fit. Like something of that nature. I'm just sort of making this up off the top of my head, but that's the kind of thing they would want to hear. Okay, so let's see here. So to sum up, then we can get on with questions because there's 32 people here. The best answer would be to talk about the organization. Okay, they say, why do you want to work here? And then you talk about them. You say, well, I know that you guys do this and you provide this and this is your competitive edge and, things like this, things of that nature. You talk about the organization. You can maybe talk about what you like about their products, if that applies, okay? Or the way they operate, if you know about that, right? Something about the organization that you think is really good. Pick a couple of things that they do or that they are and tell them why you think that's awesome. Okay, that's basically what lets you pass this question with flying colors. Talk about, how this role fits you perfectly. Okay, it fits with your personality, it fits with your expertise. Okay, so you do all that kind of stuff or things like that. That's what they're looking for. That's what they're probing for by asking things like this. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I think that I covered pretty much every aspect of it, but let me know if you have any more questions about that. That's how you handle the question, why do you want to work here? Okay, let's go over to you guys. So, Silver Evans is here, so hello to Silver Evans. Andres says, hello, what examples of soft skills would you use during an interview? Well, soft skills are everything other than your technical skills. So your technical skills are, your education, your work experience, like duties and skills you have, right? Everything else is soft skills. So communication skills, okay? At a fundamental level, communication skills are you want them to understand something. So you communicate that. Now, bear with me for a second. I know that seems blindingly, stupidly obvious, but it's not as simple as that. If you say the words like, oh yeah, I'm good at this, right? Now, as you might have picked up on, my body language is coloring what I'm saying. Right? So if I say, actually, I'm really good at this. If I say it like that, you might actually believe me. But if I say, yeah, I'm really good at this, do you believe me? Probably not. You're probably getting the opposite message of what I'm trying to convey, right? Simply by the way I'm coloring it. That's communication skills, right? It's getting them to understand what you want them to understand. And that's a combination not only of what you say, but how you say it and, eye contact, body language, all that kind of stuff. If I show up dressed in sweatpants and a white vest with food stains all down the front, with my hair uncombed, what little hair I have left, with, all totally unshaven, and I tell them, oh yeah, like I'm really good at this. Are they going to believe me? Well, maybe not. Maybe I have good communication skills, but because I made bad decisions in my grooming and my attire, like how I'm dressed, they probably don't believe me because I don't look like the candidate, right? So it sounds kind of dumb, and a lot of technical people, a lot of introverts, you probably don't place value or very much value on this kind of stuff. But the reality is when you're just meeting someone for the first time, this stuff really matters, right? It's all cosmetic, right? There's no substance there. It's all cosmetics. It's all just appearances, first impressions, right? But you would not believe how important that is when you're just meeting someone for the first time. They don't know you. They don't know that you're awesome. In order to determine who you are, they're going off what they see in front of them. And if they see someone that looks kind of bored and don't seem very excited, and they don't seem very confident, that's going to totally color their impression of you, right? So when you talk about soft skills, what soft skills do you need? You need to be able to communicate what you want to communicate. And it's not as simple as just saying some words. The whole package is taken into account. Okay? This is why I highly recommend, and I mean, this is not very original, but I highly recommend that if you're not doing it, you do mock interviews, like practice job interviews that you do with a friend or family member, just to sort of rehearse like how to do this. Concepts are relatively simple. Actually doing it is a little bit harder. It's like playing a musical instrument, You can learn like, okay, I can learn the piano from a book. Okay, I got to put my finger here on this key, like that. You can learn that, right? But does that mean you're going to be able to play some fantastical piano piece like the first time? Of course not, right? There's a little bit different between the theory and the practice. So you got to rehearse. Practice makes perfect. And if you do that, you can get this. And if you have a friend or family member that you trust, that you actually trust their opinion, it's kind of a tall order sometimes, but, with these people. But, if you trust them to give you objective feedback about yourself, that can be like an added bonus, right? You say like, how am I doing? And like, what did you think? And, if you have someone that is not out to lunch that actually can be honest with you, they may say stuff like, listen, I think you did good. Your answers were fine, as far as I could tell. But, you seem pissed off, like you really don't seem very friendly. I don't know if you can do something or work on that. I don't know, smile more or something, or just not be in such a, don't kind of bark out answers like in this kind of annoyed way. If you could just be a little bit more friendly or something, I think that would really help. Something like that, right? That's invaluable to have that. That's why a lot of technical people, this is where they really stumble. It's not that this stuff is rocket science. It's that, in my experience, I believe it's because a lot of people like that, of which I'm one, they don't respect this stuff. They don't place value on it. And then it comes back to bite them in the ass. They're brilliant. They're very technically smart, and that's wonderful. But they might have a bit of a blind spot for this kind of stuff. So I know I'm kind of beating this to death, Andres, but, so communication skills, persuasion skills, how to convince somebody of something, right? That is what you're there for. You're there to sell yourself. They're talking to like several candidates. On paper, all of them are technically qualified to do the job. Okay? Doesn't make any sense for them to bring in people that on paper just are not qualified. What would be the point of that? Even if you think they're wonderful in person, you still can't hire them because they're not qualified. So everyone that they're talking to, excuse me, it's like coughing to my watch. Everyone that they're talking to is technically qualified. So the tiebreaker is going to be other things than your technical skills, right? It usually comes down to what you're like as a person. Are you the type of person the boss would want to work with or not? There's a lot of people out there that are technically brilliant that are terrible to work with. They're insufferable. Every time you go and deal with them, you get an argument on your hands. It's never easy dealing with them, right? Or maybe they're brilliant, but you can't get them to actually turn in their work on time or follow rules or, stuff like this. Like there's all kinds of issues. People that are technically brilliant, but they just can't collaborate with anybody. They're too set in their ways. They have to do it the way they want to do it, and they can't compromise on anything ever. That kills it. You want to hire that person, but you just can't because, I'm sorry, you've got to be able to collaborate. You've got to insert yourself into this big machine. We all have our roles to play. We all have to work together. And I'm sorry, if you just can't do that, it's just not going to work, So those are the soft skills. Soft skills are like what you're like. Do they want to work with you? And can you sell yourself and say listen, you need to forget all those other people and hire me, and here's why, right? I can do this. I know this. And, I have done this, stuff like that. And they go, oh, okay. Hopefully that makes sense. Silver Evans says, I wanted to share something good with you. Thank you for your streams and videos. I finally managed to get hired the other day. Oh, well, right on. Congratulations, Silver Evidence. Silver Evans, or Evidence as your name should be. Your name was always intended to be, but for a mishap. I finally managed to get hired the other day. Thank you for the encouragement and advice. That's great news. Congratulations, and you deserve it. How do you say this? Momo Breton. Momo Breton says, hello, where to build a solid network besides LinkedIn and events? Listen, a network is just people you talk to, right? Now, if you're an extrovert, you'll probably enjoy doing the events and meeting people in person, right? If you're an introvert, you'll probably, make a lot of use of social media, and LinkedIn is the king of that for business social media. Although I gotta say, I hate being on LinkedIn these days. Ever since Microsoft bought it a few years ago, it's just gone downhill. People use it to argue about politics and all kinds of stupid BS, instead of like this kind of professional sort of referral service and connection service that it used to be. They're really doing everything in their power to dumb it right down so that it's just this annoying, stupid social media thing, just like Facebook. That's my personal opinion of it. But I go on there and all I see is people arguing about extreme political theories and, stuff like this, arguing about this and arguing about that. Professional, smart people, especially people that are way up here, they just don't. The general rule is they don't argue. It's a waste of time. Oh no, I can't come to bed. Someone's wrong on the internet. This will not stand. Seriously? Anyway. But if you're an introvert, LinkedIn still has some value because it's the number one place to see inside of organizations to the individuals, and find out who does what within an organization. You also, as an added bonus, you can then connect with them. You can connect with them and communicate with them through several different channels or several different means through LinkedIn, right? You can send connection requests. You can send in-mails. You can see their email address. You could, there's like a whole bunch of stuff in there. So, and then they have the whole job thing. And the whole job thing, getting hired on LinkedIn directly where you interface with recruiters, the way I regard it, it's like a totally separate sort of function. I recommend LinkedIn, wholeheartedly for connecting with people, doing the networking stuff. I don't necessarily recommend it for applying for posted jobs because it's just like, as far as I'm familiar with it, it's just like Indeed or any of those other sort of job aggregators, including all the negative aspects that come with it. Now this is what I talk about in my course, by the way. If you want to get hired and you're kind of a little bit lost, get that course. All my advice is right there. But I talk about in my course about how to get hired in the posted job market and how to get hired in the hidden job market. The big thing for a lot of people is going to be direct outreach, okay? Especially if you're just starting out with the networking stuff. It's one of the simpler methods. You can do it, if you're an extrovert, you can do it by going to events and stuff. If you're an introvert, you could do it certainly on the internet, between Google Maps and LinkedIn and things like this. It's really, really straightforward to do once you understand a few principles about how the world works and how, what it's like to be on the other side of the table. You know what I mean? Like if you're hiring somebody, how you operate, what your perception is. If you understand some basic stuff, it's a great thing. And the other thing is that you can not know a single soul. If you're just moving to a different country or a different city, you will know nobody in that city a lot of times, right? Absolutely nobody in your industry. you just moved there for whatever reason and you want to look for a job, and you can do direct outreach in that location. You don't know these people. You're not reaching out to people. That's not how this works. It's that you're reaching out to the appropriate person at that organization that has the power to hire you, and you know what to say, and you know how to connect with them. So that's the idea. So direct outreach is going to be a real, important thing that's going to generate a lot of opportunities for you. So, I mean, I talk all about that in my course. You can get my course. I have some free YouTube videos on my YouTube channel. I have a playlist on if you go to my channel, like my channel page, it has some playlists and things. There's a playlist I did years ago called, what the hell is it called? It's called How to Tap the Hidden Job Market. And it gives you like an overview of how to do direct outreach using LinkedIn to do a lot of the discovery and connection stuff. So you could start with that. But this is a thing. I mean, this is not particular to me. I mean, this is a well-known thing. This is, when you get into management and you get above the sort of supervisor level, increasingly, this is how people get hired. They don't respond to posted jobs. They do this kind of networking, right? Anyway, hopefully that makes sense. Jeff L says, hello, Mr. Bill. I have a question. I have a potential job that I may get on Friday. Okay, well, hey, fingers crossed. And I'll be in a position I've never been in before. I'll be hiring people at a temp agency. Okay. Any advice on reviewing resumes? No. There's no sort of one-size-fits-all blanket way of doing it. It really depends what you're doing. If you're doing casual labor, unskilled, you do it one way. If you're doing like highly specialized, highly technically complex positions, like very targeted at a high level, that's different. And then if you're doing the sort of management thing, you're hiring managers or you're assisting hiring with managers, that's done yet a different way. So there is no one size fits all. It's just, all I would say is for advice is learn what's most appropriate for your situation by asking and observing what the other people in that environment are doing, right? Get a feel for their culture. That means how things are done there, right? Like what their expectations are and what they expect you to do. Really get a feel for that. Don't just walk in and just assume you know how to do it simply because you've done it before in a different situation. Confirm that everything you've done that you would normally do as a default is in fact what they expect, right? And is appropriate to this particular situation, is what I'd say. Right. The other thing that complicates matters is that, people are in the process of integrating AI into the hiring process at many different points. So depending on how that's being done at this new place that you might be starting at, or you are starting at, that's going to obviously change how you review a resume. You might not even be reviewing a resume until the very late stages, depending on how they've implemented things. So that's why I can say even less about like what to do. Okay, that's really the deal. The only real general rule, which you probably know already, is that the more you get to know someone, the better your call will be. It's just that simple. And a lot of recruiters are taught broad sort of generalizations and stereotypes. And, I understand why. Statistically, they tend to work out, but the problem with recruiting is that their goal is to hire the least risky person. And the problem is, all things being equal, it's hard to assemble a winning team if your decisions about how to pick every single person were based on who's the least risky. You usually don't end up with greatness when you do that. You end up with lowest common denominator, boring, people that don't take initiative. They won't quit on you. They'll do what they're told, but you don't get brilliance. So in most organizations, truth be told, they're not looking for brilliance. But the problem is when they are, when you use this method, a lot of times it doesn't work out. Anyway, I don't know if that was helpful or not. That probably wasn't very helpful, but that's all I can say. Jeff, I'm sure you'll do fine. You seem to know what you're doing. Silver Evans says, I really like that Silver Evidence. Yeah, well, when you have, a sort of great mind like mine who trips over basic words like your name, which, is also the height of good manners to like bastardize somebody's name right to their face, everything just falls into place and works out. What can I say? I'm glad you like that, Silver Evans. I apologize for bastardizing your name. Momo Breton says, haha, yes, I am French. You can say it like this. Momo Breton. Bonjour. Comment ça va? C'est bon ça. Okay, right on. We can do all our stuff in French. I have to glue on a mustache in order to talk like that. Those are the rules. Let's see. Jeff L says, magnifique. I want to become more extrovert. I don't feel the connection online. Oh yeah. Online is like the opposite of human connection. This is the thing, right? And I mean, I'm an introvert, right? And I can see that. If I could see that, it's got to be blindingly obvious. Listen, I don't know if you're anything like me, okay? But if you are, you're probably an introvert at heart, okay? Which means that you can do social interaction, it's just that you hate it, right? It's not what you do for fun. You can force yourself to do it. For example, in high school or in university or whatever you did, you might have had to give presentations and things, and you can rise to the occasion. You might even feel somewhat comfortable doing it, but it's not your idea of a good time. And when you come home after a hard day at work or whatever, or whatever, at the end of the day, if you're in school or whatever, what you want to do is you just want to be alone. You want to watch TV, play video games, read a book, that kind of stuff. That's how you recharge the battery, right? So you're an introvert, but you can go through the motions. You can force yourself to do public speaking. You can force yourself to, have a conversation, to meet new people. It's not like you can't do any of that stuff. It's an acquired skill, just like anything else. It's not particularly fun for you. If you do it for enough years, you tend to lose a bit of the nervousness, and it doesn't feel like that much of a chore. It'll never be something that you do for fun, but it's totally okay, especially if you've been doing it for years. You know what I mean? So if that's you, if you can sort of force yourself to do it, you might even get good at it, because it's a skill like any other. And I got to say, I've met a lot of extroverts that they enjoy this kind of stuff, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're good at it. They enjoy doing it, but they've never sort of studied how you do it properly. What's the right thing to say in what situation? What's the right thing to say to a group? What's the right thing to open a conversation with? They haven't studied that stuff. So they might enjoy talking to people, but they're not particularly good at it. You might be better. You might be better at making a first impression sometimes, if it's important, like in a job interview. Okay, so if you're anything like me, you learn that you can do this stuff, So you want to be more extrovert, okay? I mean, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. Or a psychiatrist. So, I'm just sort of talking about this stuff based on my own experiences. If you feel like you can do that kind of stuff, extroverted type interactions under controlled circumstances, you sort of set the rules and kind of limit it and say, okay, I'm not comfortable doing like a sort of going to an event and trying to make connections. That's kind of a bit beyond me. I don't want to do that. But, I'd be open to doing an informational interview. And the idea is that you set up the informational interview online, which maybe you're more comfortable with doing. You confirm the person does want to talk to you. You let them signal that and invite you down. And you say, okay, if I'm invited down there, I'll go talk to a person I don't know. If it's promising for a job opportunity or something. But if they invite me down, I'll go. But I'm not interested in forcing myself on anyone. So you're still kind of controlling the way you do this. That's what I'd recommend. I'd recommend stepping out of yourself and like doing more of these kinds of activities, but in a controlled kind of way. So you're not totally outside of your comfort zone. It's just a little bit outside, And if you do enough of them, you'll really get used to it. You'll see the patterns. You'll see that you're not doing a terrible job. People are responding positively to you. And then that gives you confidence, and then the more confidence you have, the easier it is. And it just rolls on, right? Silver Evans says, I think networking was the hardest part. Indeed, and any of the modern day job boards were just not working for me. I struggled to even get interviews. Okay, so you did networking. That's good. Yeah, that's where all the jobs are, really. 80% of all the jobs are hidden, and you access them, via some version of networking. You're welcome, Jeff L. Left Shark says, screening interview 2 hours ago. I punted on the question. Well, what does punted mean? Is that like a football reference? I don't know football references. I've had conversations with business people that talk about mulligans and all this. It's like, what? You know what I mean? Like, hey, if you know football, right on, all the more power to you. But like, if you want to talk business and your business conversation is all about football, that's weird, I punted on the question, what would your former supervisor say about you? Any general advice? Okay, so I assume punted means that you didn't do very well. Okay, so that's a seemingly cleverly disguised version of the question, what is your weakness? Right? They're asking you for something negative about yourself, right? Instead of saying, what's your weakness? Instead, they're saying, well, if we were to hypothetically talk to your previous supervisor, what would they say about you that's bad? Or something like that, right? Okay. In which case, now they're not saying what's bad. They're just saying, what would they say about you? So first of all, don't say anything negative, right? That's the general rule. Don't say anything negative in a job interview at all about anyone. Okay, about your coworkers, your boss, your previous coworkers, about previous employers. Nobody. You do not say bad things in a job interview. If you do, you fail because sometimes they probe you for that. And the idea is that if you say anything bad, you're the type of person that talks about people behind their back and you say bad things. Okay, message received. We now know who you are. No deal. Because if you're going to talk bad about them, you're going to talk bad about us if we hire you, right? And we don't want that. Okay, and don't say any bad things about yourself. When they ask you the question, what is your weakness? Don't give any real weaknesses because the moment you do, you're dead. You've eliminated yourself. Recruiters like to say, oh, we just want to know that you're self-aware and that, you have had the maturity to recognize that, you have weaknesses and you're working on them. That's all we want to confirm. It's like BS. The moment you give a weakness, in most situations, they eliminate you based on the fact that you have that weakness. I've seen that so many times. And instead, they hire the person that does not give any kind of weakness when they're asked that question, even though we all know that they have weaknesses, right? It's stupid. So do not say anything negative. And instead, it's a platform for you to talk about your strengths. So what would your former supervisor say about you? Well, the best possible thing I think you can do, assuming that, this hasn't just come up in the last 2 minutes or something, is the things that they said they were looking for in the job posting. They said you should have this education, these skills, this experience, things like that, right? Use this question as a platform to reiterate to them that you have all those things that they said they were looking for, right? What would your supervisor say? Oh, my supervisor actually got along with them really well. You see, I'm just that type of person, right? I get along with people really well. And we had a great relationship. I thought they were a fantastic supervisor too, incidentally. But if you ask them what they think of me, they'd probably say something like, they thought I was great because I had this education and these skills and this experience. It allowed me to do these kind of things well, right? And then all your soft skills. Well, I'm punctual. I take direction very easily. I can collaborate with people really well. If there's an issue, I know the appropriate way of handling it. If I have a question, I know how to approach the supervisor to ask the question and get help when I need it and clarify things when things are unclear. It's a platform for you to communicate to them how awesome you are in all the different areas. So whichever area maybe has not come up yet in the job interview, right? And they ask you this, well, there's the perfect question to use as a vehicle to tell them about how awesome you are, in terms of getting along with other people and collaborating on stuff, stuff like that. That's how I'd answer it. Jeff says, I've done the phone interview and the Zoom interview. Now I need to meet them in person on Friday. Okay. Is it possible to get a temporary face tattoo? Because if so, this might be your moment to shine, Go down there and make a statement, if you know what I'm saying. I'm just kidding. You want to go down there, you want to, confirm all their positive suspicions about you. If you made a good impression, which you obviously did, since they're inviting you back, you want to go down there, you want to confirm all that. You're easy to get along with, you're a fit for this job, your ambition is to do with this, you want to do this kind of thing, you're professional, all the rest of it. You want to confirm all of that, right? So hopefully that makes sense. There really isn't much difference between like a Zoom call and meeting somebody in person in terms of like the questions that they ask and stuff like that. I mean, you're physically in the room. So the only real thing that's different is you have to shake their hand or, stuff like that. They can see your whole body. Make sure you're wearing pants. You're not wearing the clown pants with the clown shoes or anything like that, beneath the table, right? That could be fine for a Zoom call, but this is the real deal, right? You got to keep your eccentricities, as we shall say, on the DL. Alex says, all is good with my work on my job. Support from experienced operators and line leaders as well. Well, congratulations, Alex. It sounds like things are going your way, and that's always a good thing. Jeff L is speaking parle le français. On va parler le français. Je parle français aussi. C'est mon deuxième langue. Something like that. Alex Roska says, I am introvert, although I interact well with others, but same here. I need to be alone in my days off. I am introvert. That's good. You could, hey, if you want to tattoo something across your face, you could put that. I am introvert, hear me roar. I am introvert, hear me whisper, that kind of thing. That's good. Left Shark says, I choked. Okay. Punted in football means you kicked the ball. Yes, I know that, but what does that mean in a job interview? Was that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know when you kick the damn ball in football. I'm not a football guy. I'm Canadian. What do you guys know about Canadian football? Tell me that. It's probably about as much as I know about American hockey. So I don't know if that's a good thing. How many meters long is the field in Canadian football? That's what I want to know. Who can tell me that? If you can tell me that, you win the prize. Okay, so get in the chat. And by the way, if you're here and you're lost at how to get a job, check out that link in the description. All my advice, all in one place. How to get hired in the posted job market, which you can probably find online, right? Lots of people do videos. There's a lot of resources, but also how to get hired in the hidden job market. That's a little harder to find. First of all, most recruiters don't really know about it because they don't operate in the hidden job market. The vast majority of them, they post jobs. They deal with posted jobs, right? And networking is kind of the hack for the hiring process, right? There's no rules. There's no process. You do whatever the hell you want. You can talk. I got news for you. If you don't realize this, you are a free person. You're not a slave. You actually, believe it or not, have the right to talk to anyone you want. You wouldn't think so by some of the comments I get. I get comments on some of my videos or some of my live streams from usually young people who say words to the effect of, who am I to talk to some hiring manager somewhere? I'm nobody. I don't even have the right to talk to them. So you telling me that I could just talk to them, that's crap. Tell me what I want to hear. And that is that I'm a nobody. I don't have the right to speak to these people. But yet, although I'm absolutely sure of that, I've never actually attempted this, right? So that's what I get a lot. I get that a hell of a lot. And listen, 1 year, maybe not this year, but I hope that you will wake up and you will look around and you will see how people seem to get hired around you. The odds are is that you have family members that got jobs that were not posted publicly. They got the job because they had some kind of personal connection, maybe a former coworker or something like that. Maybe one of their former coworkers is now the boss somewhere else, this kind of thing. And they didn't apply through official channels. They just called up the boss or they called up a coworker and they said, hey, dude, get me in. Right? Now, if you don't believe me, just look around, okay? You don't have to take my word for anything. Just open your eyes, look around. This is real. You have the right to talk to anyone you want. Okay? I built like what I do, my day job, which is, being a management consultant. I built up my consulting business by doing informational interviews with CEOs. I reached out to CEOs I didn't know. They didn't know me. And I did a ton of these. And a lot of those people ended up being my consulting clients. Like that's a sort of higher level version of this, but it's the exact same principle. And I can tell you something else. If you've done something, that gives you supreme confidence because nobody can tell you that it can't be done when you've done it. Okay. So this is another reason why I encourage you to go out, not just listen to advice all the time, try things. Okay. Accomplish things. Okay, no one can take it away from you when you've accomplished something. You've done it, you've seen it with your own eyes, done it with your own hands. No one can tell you it doesn't exist or it can't be done. Okay. Mona Berton says, yes, I felt like that. Some mistake me for an extrovert, but when I'm not in the mood, I'm exhausted. Yes. Yeah, welcome to my world. That's what it's like. You can mimic people that enjoy this stuff because you can be just as good as it as them. Right? It takes a hell of a lot of effort, but you can. Left Shark says, thank you, no more football refs. Oh, yeah. Well, you can make them, but I just won't understand them, right? Marishka says, and now in Russian. Oh, I don't know Russian. Da. I know da and yet, and that's about it. And if you can hum the national anthem of the Soviet Union, that pretty much is the universal calling card, I think. CFL, don't know much about it. Yeah, it's okay. Nobody does. CFL is like the NFL, but Canadian. That's all I know. Yeah. What was it? Here we separate the possibly feminine from the awkward. No, the awkwardly feminine from the possibly Canadian, right? Jeff L. says, when I spoke French on here, I was telling Mona Breton that I'm American, but speak French as a secondary language. Yes. And you followed it up with a ho 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 ho. Formidable. Thank you, Jeff L. Jeff says, I'll be wearing my suit and tie on Friday when I go to this in-person interview. Yes. Well, the big question is, are you going to wear the squirting tie or the exploding tie? That's the only real decision you got to make. I'd go with the exploding tie. It's just like a real tie, except it explodes. Perfect to liven up job interviews, board meetings, anything you got, really. Keep them guessing, Be the loose cannon in the room. Some people want to be the smartest person in the room. You don't have to be when you got an exploding tie. Kiwi Magician says, I did that. They said they were looking for a women. Okay, good. So, someone had two women's at the interview is what you're saying, basically. Or that's what they wish they had until they tripped over the English language and fell on their face. But that's good because we can just speak in emojis. So you don't really need to worry about that kind of thing. Alex Rosca says, I'm assigned with a 3-month operator, and while he operates the production machines, I'm aware of what materials I need to take from pallet and transport black plastic boxes back on the pallet. So it's a meeting of the minds then. Is that what I'm understanding here? Ask him about the self when he's talking to you about pallets, and just see what he says. I'd be interested to hear. Q Magician says, hey, do you think your advice works in any country? Yes, especially when you're dealing with pallets, philosophy, existentialism, the self, or emojis, really. It's all good. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Can somebody ask me a question about job interviews and then maybe we could do something useful here? No, it's all good. It's nice to lighten up every once in a while, but it's not Friday, so this should not be allowed. Marishka says, yes, networking is very challenging for me. Listen, networking is simply talking to people. That's all it is. A lot of people have this preconceived notion that you just have to know a million people. It doesn't work like that. What are the odds? Okay, let's pretend for the second. Let's do a thought experiment. Let's pretend that you knew 400 people, okay? Like well enough that you could call them up and they would see it's you and they'd pick up the phone and they'd say, hey, Bill, what's up? Imagine you had 400 people in the world of business that you could do that to. That's really pushing it. I don't know if people really have that in real life, not 400 people. But I'm sure you've met more than 400, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people that you feel connected to on a personal level. They know who you are, they know all about you, and vice versa. That's kind of a tall order. Now imagine you had that kind of relationship with 400 people, so they would want to help you out, right? What are the odds that if those 400 people were distributed across 400 organizations, okay, that right at this moment, okay, one of those 400 people would be looking to hire, and they'd be looking to hire someone exactly like you, okay? What are the odds of that happening? They're not great, okay? And I mean, that's even if you had that relationship with 400 people. A lot of people, they probably have a relationship like that with maybe 10 people, you know what I'm saying? Not 400. So, this fallacy that you just have to know people and then bam, you'll have opportunities coming to you left, right, and center all the time. It doesn't work like that, at least not in my experience. The idea is that if you want to make something happen, you reach out, right? And we've covered how to do that before. If you're impatient to see what that's like, there's a video that's linked in the description box under this live stream, in the description box of this live stream. It's a video on my channel. It's called How Successful People Get Jobs. Check out that video. That's the guide for introverts on how to make this stuff happen. Okay. It shows you kind of what it's like. Okay. So it's what direct outreach looks like if you're an introvert that anybody can do. It's just about knowing what's appropriate to say to people, what's the professional thing to say, and who to go to, and all that kind of stuff, right? So you certainly have the means to do it at your fingertips. It's just the knowledge is what most people are lacking, So check that out if you're interested. That's what I'm referring to. Okay. You can reach out directly to thousands of people if you live in a city in your hometown. If you're like a highly specialized person, you do highly specialized work, there may not be thousands of people, but if you're some say you're like an accountant or a customer service person, very common jobs, very common skill sets that are needed in every industry, you can literally reach out to thousands of people that have potential to hire someone like you, you know what I'm saying? Now, you're not going to know those people, but you reach out directly, you discover them, you don't know them, and you reach out to them cold, right? Now, it is possible to do this for introverts over social networking. You don't have to talk to a single person, not like on the phone, not in person. You can do this from the comfort of your own home. It's just a matter of knowing what to say, right? If you watch that video of mine, that shows you how to do it. The only big question now is what to say, right? And that's where the learning has to happen for a lot of people. And then the idea is that they will invite you in if there's an opportunity, right? So if you do end up going down for a job interview or an informational interview or anything like that, it's because you're invited in. They said, hey, we should talk. Can you meet me, on Thursday or something like that, right? Now, if someone reached out to you like that and they're a hiring manager, they're like a manager of a department of people at a local company, would you go? Most people would say yes. The person wants to talk to me. They have the power to hire me. Sure, yeah, I'd go. So then it's just a matter of having the conversational skills to handle that well. Okay. I understand for some people this might be like a tall order. If you're just starting out, you're like in your very early 20s, you're an introvert, you've never done anything like this. I certainly can understand that it's intimidating, or it might seem intimidating, but the reality is that this stuff is a lot easier than it sounds. I'm an ex-CEO. I was a CEO of a company. Am I that unapproachable? No. If you approach me and you say something that makes me want to respond, it's not a problem. If you talk to me like you're a spam email, then I'm not going to respond. And I'm a typical human being in that regard. Anyway, Kiwi Magician says that they were rejected. They were looking for female. Well, it depends what job you were going for. Sometimes that can be justified. Sometimes it can't. Alex Roska says, I am assigned with a 3-month. Okay, that was the pallet thing, right? We're talking about networking, fireworks attached to the top. Yeah, exactly. Well, fireworks make a bang and like a pretty kind of light, right? This is not really about that. It's about an explosion. Okay. So like it's just for fun, right? But it's not about like something pretty. It's about like making a big bang, it just kind of livens things up. Edward says, I'm interviewing for photographers that are very adept with tech terminology and canned interview responses. How do I find an effective employee? Well, this is the problem with traditional job interviews. They're extremely artificial. They're probably the most artificial encounter, certainly, I've ever had. Where like it's this stupid dance of, I ask a canned question that you were expecting, you give me a canned answer that I was expecting. You know what I mean? It's like, what I'd recommend if you want to cut through this kind of crap, and congratulations, by the way, because a lot of employers don't, not for worker level jobs, is you treat people like you're hiring for a management level position, which is it's unstructured generally, and you just try and get to know them. Now, the problem is that it's more labor intensive, takes you more time for a start, right? Okay, like it's the equivalent of doing informational interviews with somebody, right? It's the same thing in the sense that you're starting from their resume, right? So, that's kind of the idiot's guide to how to do a job interview. If you're a new manager, you've never done a job interview before, like you've never conducted a job interview before, you don't know what to do, and maybe you haven't had a chance to prepare, you're just like, oh, okay, the person's in front of you, I haven't had a chance to prepare at all for this. You plonk their resume down on the table, and you just ask them questions about what you see. It says here that you have 5 years experience being in this role. Like, tell me about that. What did you do? Or why did your career take that turn and you ended up staying there for 5 years? What was the reason you went into this kind of work? What's the reason you ended up working there for so long? You did this kind of work. What's your strategy? What's your methodology for doing that kind of work? What's your philosophy of how that work should be done? This kind of stuff. And then you get to know the person. You get to understand some of their decisions they make, the opinions they hold, the approaches they take, some of the life decisions they've made, and their personality and opinions and preferences, right? Like that's what you're really talking about. Some of that might be overkill if you're hiring somebody at the worker level, but that's kind of what they do for a lot of management positions. And it's a long process because you really need to get to know the person, right? You're going to put them in charge of your baby, this group of people that generates money. And if this person screws it up, not only will those people maybe be let go, but you'll lose a ton of money and you'll alienate a ton of customers, maybe ruin your reputation in the market for a very long time. It's important you get the right person and you got to understand them. So it's a very labor-intensive process, but it's very revealing. And then you can make the determination of, do you want that person? And the problem is that beyond the technical skills, there is no right or wrong answer because some people want to hire in their own image. I get along with someone who's just like me. I understand a person who's just like me. Great. The only problem is that if you fill an organization full of people that are just like you, it tends to not be as successful as if you filled it with a diversity of skill sets. People from different backgrounds, different personalities, different communication styles, this kind of thing, right? There's a lot of data that shows that is much more profitable and effective. It's more challenging for how to manage the organization, but it's more effective if you can do it right. So then it's up to you who you want to hire, but at least you see more of what you're getting. And if you have unstructured conversations with people, they tend to let their guard down. After the first hour or so, they tend to drop their guard, and they'll just be honest with you, like you're talking to a friend, and assuming you do it properly. And you really get to see who that person is. You get to see all their strengths and maybe some liabilities there. Anyway. Alex Roska said, I'm both operator and material 1-2. I've done a lot of kilometers, that I know entire process and where to take the electronics. Okay, great. You're talking all about yourself. Do you have a question like at the end of this? Edward says, to clarify, how do I not fall for tech talk and buzzwords? I need to find a photographer that will actually produce deliverable images. Well, the obvious thing there is to ask them for samples of their work. Do you have a demonstration? That's the obvious thing. The only way to talk shop with somebody and be able to detect BS is to understand the nature of the shop talk. You know what I mean? I don't think there's like some weird intellectual shortcut where you could talk shop with somebody and not know anything about that business, but yet detect that they don't know anything. You know what I mean? If they're just talking about technical things. If there is, I'm not aware of it, You know what I mean? Get them to explain it to you, how it works. Say like, look, I don't know how to do this, but I understand that you do. How is it done? And then like have them explain and then challenge them on something. Say, well, okay, fair enough, but I still don't understand when you said this step here. I still don't understand what you mean by that. Like, I don't see how anyone can go from this to that, and then have them get into that and then challenge them again on like a dive right down in the weeds and say like, well, this, I don't get how you do that there. In my experience, it doesn't work like that. It works like this. And then have them explain that. And, it's obviously a method based on random sampling, but like if they can like make them justify everything down to that level, then that's probably a good enough test. Or at least it tends to indicate that they know what they're talking about. You know what I mean? That's the only way I know. I mean, it helps to talk about things you yourself know about so you can assess the other person. Right? Like this is the business that recruiters are in. You see, recruiters are in the business of trying to assess someone where they have no technical knowledge whatsoever about the nature of that job or that role, right? So that's why they revert to a lot of like psychological type stuff. Are you motivated? Is the salary to your liking? Are you a fit? Like this kind of stuff. Can you tell me a story from your past where you did this exact thing before? You know what I mean? And I can't tell if you made that up off the top of your head or it's valid or not. But what I can tell is if you waffle and you you obviously can't come up with something when I ask, I just conclude that it's because you don't know what you're talking about and you don't know this material. That may not be the case, but you see, they operate like that. That's how recruiters do their job. And as a result, usually you still need the hiring manager to assess the person's technical skills because they're usually technical authorities on what this person's going to be doing. So between the two of them, in theory, you cover all your bases. Doesn't usually work out like that, but that's the theory anyway. Okay, Alex is going on about himself. Edward sends a super chat. Thank you very much, Edward. Edward says, thank you for this great insight. You're absolutely welcome, Edward. It's fun to talk about higher level stuff, which is great. So I'm really kind of enjoying the fact that you're asking me about like sort of higher level stuff that I don't usually get to talk about. So that's great. Thank you. And thank you for the super chat. Kiwi Magician says, how do you handle gotcha questions? That sounds like a Mexican bean dish of some type. I'm going to get a bowl of gotcha to go with my tequila, have my siesta at my hacienda, and then do a hat dance, that kind of thing. So I'm assuming you mean gotcha. Okay, like gotcha, like in other words, a trick question. Now, the vast majority of job interview questions you're going to encounter are trick questions to a degree. Some outright, and others kind of subtle ones, right? The king of trick questions is, what is your weakness? Okay, because usually the way it works is that the moment you actually give a weakness, you give them what they're looking for, you lose, right? Same with, what are your salary expectations? We need a number. We need you to tell us how much money you need. The moment you give a number, you're dead. It's bad for you, right? Either you priced yourself out of the market because it's too high, or you tied yourself to a low number that they're going to like anchor their offer to if you get that far. So it's bad for you either way, right? Like there's a lot of trick questions. Okay, so there is no one way of handling them all. The only thing I can say in a very general sense is learn the standard answers to the standard job interview questions, so you can't fall for these sort of first level traps. Okay? That's the thing, right? Like, for example, they might say, where do you see yourself in 5 years, right? And being an honest, helpful person, like you are, Kiwi Magician, right? You're honest with them and you say like, well, I need money, so I do this kind of work. But one day I hope to really make it as an author. I know I'm stacking pallets and collapsing boxes and stuff in a warehouse today, and that's what this job is for. I get that. And this is what I do, for a living. But in 5 years, I'm really hoping that my writing career will have taken off. This book that I'm going to write, basically by using ChatGPT. I'm going to get ChatGPT to write it for me, and I'm going to put my name on it and hope nobody notices. I think it's a perfect plan. And I don't envision myself doing this ever again. So basically what you said is that in 5 years, you see yourself doing something completely different to this job, right? You just failed the question. You walked into the trap, right? If you say anything other than like, I want to be in this job or something very close to it, right? You basically fail, right? They're setting you up for a fall. They're probing for like, is this the case? And if it is, you say it and then they eliminate you, right? So most job interview questions are some form of trick question, right? That's why you got to rehearse these things. It's not that hard to do. You can just do a Google search and find decent answers you can get on ChatGPT and get answers to this. Or you could watch my videos and get even better answers. But, learn the answers, memorize them, And then when you go to a job interview, you are aware that, they're probing for this. Well, I'm not going to fall into that trap. You know, they ask that question like, what would your boss say is the worst thing about you, or something like that? Like, they ask you these questions, and you know, you say, well, thank you for that question. That's a brilliant question. I would have to say that my boss, if you asked him what, you know, he thought of me, he would say, that effing jackass. You know, I can't wait till he's out of here, because quite frankly, he pisses me off. He smells, and he doesn't do very good work. And what work he does a terrible job, but he does it really slowly, so it's not as bad as you think. I just hate his guts, right? You know, but it's fine because we're friends, you know, or something like that, right? And they say, well, thank you very much. That's great, you know, that you've told us this, and we certainly appreciate it. And we'll be in touch, you know, and they've eliminated you. So they're all trick questions. Step 1, learn the answers to these, memorize them. Step 2, do practice interviews with a friend or family member. Get them to do a pretend job interview with you. They be the interviewer, you be the candidate, and do a whole bunch of these, right? If you want to really level it up, you can hire a career coach. Maybe just do one session with a career coach. I'm not a career coach, by the way. I don't offer those services, so I'm not talking about myself. But a lot of people are career coaches. I collaborate with another YouTuber. She's a career coach. Maybe one interview, a mock interview with them, and they can give you some professional feedback from a recruiter and say, give you some pointers here and there about your answers or the way you're answering the questions, something like that. Right? So that's how you really get good at this, if you're going to be dealing with recruiters. Not everybody deals with recruiters. A lot of people deal with people at higher levels, but if you're dealing with recruiters, that's kind of probably the way to do it. Julius C. Rizzo. So that's Julius Caesar Rizzo says, I just watched the most important question. Why do you want to work here, or why us? Okay, so go back to the beginning of this live stream where I answered that question in great detail and watch from there, okay? Because I already covered that, okay? But I covered it in depth, so go check that out. Math Proof says, how do you handle stress when they are asking about simple questions? I don't quite understand what you mean. Look, the way to handle stress in a job interview is to be as prepared as possible for it, okay? Then be as rehearsed as you could possibly be, doing the mock interviews I talked about a moment ago. And then recognize the fact that, look, even if you did all that to a ridiculous degree, you would never feel 100% comfortable. You're always going to be a little bit out of your comfort zone, even if you're thoroughly prepared and rehearsed for it. If you do a lot of interviews over time, the years go by, you do more of these things, you get confident. You get better at it. You get more confident when you see yourself getting better at it. It's just like anything else in life. Practice makes perfect. And when you're just starting out, there's really a limit to how good you can be and how comfortable you feel. But don't worry about it, because you always do better than you think you do. Okay? That's how these things work. In your mind, you're panicking and you're thinking, oh my God, I am sure I'm doing a terrible job. In reality, they're not picking up on any of that. Okay? So don't sweat it. You're going to be fine. Everybody starts somewhere. Everybody starts out at the beginning, right? The more you do of these, the better you get. Mock interviews are really a great thing, because instead of making all your sort of rookie mistakes at actual job interviews, instead you're making them in the rehearsal where you don't lose a job, So mock interviews really are a thing you should push for. A lot of young people will think that's optional, therefore I'm not going to do it. Okay, fair enough, but you're really missing out on something that's going to enable you to kick ass at this process. Okay, so I highly recommend you consider, grab some worthless, dirtbag that you have, like, loitering around your home or your dorm or, wherever you are, some worthless piece of crap that's no use to themselves or anyone else. Get them, grab them, say, come here, you're going to help me out. We're going to do a pretend job interview. You're going to be the interviewer. I'm going to be the person you're interviewing. And we're going to do this like it's a real thing. And the whole point of this is to give me some practice. But as an added bonus, I'll let you tell me what you think of me when this is all over. Okay? Like give it to me straight. Okay? And do this. And this will really help you, because if you feel nervous doing it, that's good. It's simulating the actual thing. You're going to feel nervous when you do the actual thing, right? So it's good on multiple levels. It'll really prove to you what you've actually remembered in terms of answering questions, and it'll help you work through that when you're nervous. Okay, someone was asking how to handle stress. This is also the sort of treatment for doing that. You work under a slightly stressful, conditions. They're controlled conditions, but they're still like, it's stressful. You got another person kind of staring at you. And you, like, if you did 3 of these a day for 10 days, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, like 2 weeks, right? And you had 3 a day, that's a total of 30 mock interviews. You're going to kick ass by the end. You're not going to be nervous about answering all the standard questions because you know what to say and you've been through it many times, right? So that's going to help your confidence. By the way, if you want to learn how to do a lot of this stuff, once again, check out this course. That's the course where I put all my knowledge, all my teaching, all my recommendations all in one place. And the primary value is for introverts who are interested in pursuing opportunities on the hidden job market. 80% of jobs are in the hidden job market. If you don't know how to go after those, this teaches you how to do it. Okay, you can do it if you're an introvert. It's the exact same method I use to build up my consulting business. So, yeah, check it out if you're looking for that. 912 Racing says, what was the process for interviewing for a CEO position? My aunt, is that how you say it in the US? You see, I would say my aunt, but I've heard my aunt. Those are the types of people that get their pinkies up when they say they have to. My aunt is a COO, like a chief operating officer for a large firm, and said she only took the job because she was targeted by the CEO because they previously worked together. Yeah, that's pretty much, a common thing. You see, those positions, it's about trust. Yes, there's ability involved, right? But it's mainly about trust. It's almost impossible to get those roles where they hire a stranger. The only time you would see that is if the person is some kind of superstar that's like famous within the circles of that industry. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? You have to know the person, right? Now, how do you know the person? Well, maybe you go way back together, back to the good old days, or you could have still done the direct outreach thing, right? They're not going to like meet you one day and then make you COO the next day. But, if you sort of, meet them that way, they have a few conversations, a few informational interviews with you. You then go and see them at events and things like this. So they know you, you're around, you're in the industry, and your skill sets align, then there's a chance they can get you for like those kind of roles in smaller companies. You know what I mean? It really depends. But that doesn't surprise me, how they already had a prior relationship. So if you have a coworker that you worked with, in a job, and that was 10 years ago, and in the meantime, that person's been promoted up like 4 or 5 levels, and next thing you know them and they're like at the C level or they're at a VP level or whatever they're at, the director level, and, you have comparable skills and they've got an opening, you can go in there because they know you, they've worked with you. And that's where having good relationships with people, like with your coworkers and stuff, really can pay off. That's one way of getting those positions, So yeah, so you're asking what was the process for interviewing for a CEO position? Well, like once again, like I knew people in the company. So the reason they put me in there was because I'd been there a while, and I'd worked with them for a few years. So it's like a natural kind of thing, right? So that was my story. And I mean, that's very common. I mean, we see that at lower levels too, like managers and assistant managers, that's kind of why you have an assistant manager, right? To be sort of the backup for the manager. The manager retires, the manager quits, whatever. Who's the shoe-in? The assistant manager, right? And then they'll have their sort of replacement that they've been grooming, maybe like a lead hand or some other kind of more junior person that would move up into the assistant manager position, right? So it's like a sort of progression. And you need that because to varying degrees, people will shadow somebody to learn that job, right? Sometimes it's exclusively based on that. Others, it's not really based on that heavily, but it's more to just learn that person's wants, wills, and needs and methods and expectations, so they can work under them, right? And I mean, that's very important. But there's also a certain amount of visibility that's important there too. You have to be kind of visible. They're not going to pick the person like that's way at the back, they're going to pick the person that's right in front of them, right? They're the obvious choice unless there's some weird thing going on where they wouldn't be a fit. Jeff is talking about me. I'm always interested to hear what people say about me. Kiwi Magician says, Bill has each question and answer on his channel. Watch each video in the series like 12 times each. So that's drilled into your, get it tattooed onto your back, right? But it has to be backwards so that you can read it in a mirror, okay? And make sure you're thin enough to do this too. I don't want to tell you about what happened when I tried that. Make flashcards with the Q&A and practice with a friend. Yes, that's actually good advice. Mohammed says, when you've got a job offer in place and are planning on taking it, when do you exactly resign from your current job? Thanks a lot, Bill. Always grateful for your guidance. You're absolutely welcome, Mohammed. And with a praise like that, how could I not answer? By the way, there's 30 people here. Thank you for joining me today. Okay, so Mohammed, listen, you would resign as late as possible, okay? Like, it doesn't do you any good to resign early, okay? It really doesn't, because you see, every time you switch jobs, there's a certain amount of risk, okay? Like, there's risk in everything. Even staying at a job is risky. They could always fire you at any moment, I suppose. It's not very likely for most people, but it is possible. And sometimes it happens. But when you switch jobs, you're jumping from a place that you kind of know what the deal is to another group of people where you don't know really what's going on. You might have a good impression of them, but you really don't know. You haven't been working there. So an offer can be rescinded. You know what I mean? You could take the job, but it's not the job that you signed on for. They've changed your duties. They've messed you around on pay and compensation or working conditions. You never know. Like, there's always risk involved, right? So that being said, I would resign as late as possible. Okay? If by law you have to give a certain amount of time notice, right? Learn what the local laws are on that where you are, okay? In your country, in your region, what are the employment standards? They'll usually specify, like, for someone in your circumstances, how much notice are you legally required to give, right? Now, what they can do is, you have the right to quit at any moment. Like, you don't have to serve out your notice, but there are consequences, like they don't have to pay you, or they'll dock your pay, or, whatever, right? There's consequences for not working out your official notice period. So just become familiar with those and then decide for yourself what makes sense for you to do. Okay? There is no one single answer to that. It really depends on your situation, where you're coming from and where you're going to, and the riskiness of everything. Okay? Usually you can find that stuff out just with a very quick Google search. You can Google like employment standards and then your region. You can make use of things like ChatGPT. The way it always worked, like at least in my country, in Canada, and I believe in the US too, all the laws are posted online. So if you do the correct Google search or whatever search, using whatever tool you want, you can find not only the law, like the act that says here's all the rules, but you can find the specific law that says in your region, this is how giving notice works. So it's literally a minute away just from your fingertips finding that out. Okay? Don't rely on, I would say, don't rely on anyone to tell you what the law says. Confirm it yourself. Okay? And then you decide. You could work right up until the day of and then say, I'm quitting now, sorry. Or you could give your official notice. Or you could quit even earlier and say, like, I want a vacation during the transition for like a couple of weeks, or something. You can do whatever you want. My close personal friend Nev says, where do you see yourself in 5 years? That's the best answer to this question. Usually it's in this job or something very closely related to it. Because if you answer that question by saying, I see myself somewhere totally different in another industry at another level, that suggests you're not a good fit. You don't really want to do this. If they hire you, it's only a matter of time before you jump out of it, do what you really want to do. That's why they ask that question. It's a trap. Okay? So even if you really want to be a Hollywood actor, a star of stage and screen, doing the lecture circuit, right? Giving your witty repartee. If that's where you see yourself, but in the meantime, you're stacking boxes in a warehouse, don't tell them that. It's irrelevant and it counts against you. You keep that to yourself. These people are your potential employer. They're not even your real employer. They don't need to know what your secret dreams are. Jeff is correct with that. Yes, Syed says, hello, can you do a video on questions like sell me this what? Now, if you said pen, I would say no, because that's been done. It would be interesting filling in a blank there. Alex Roska says, awesome. Awesome part is that one machine attaches the circuit board. Okay, we're talking about some weird machine here. Cool. Okay, we've reached the end of the chat. Get in the chat. Let me know if you guys have any questions. We've been going for an hour and a half. Also, I'd just like to point out, get that course if you are looking to get hired. If you're looking to learn about the hidden job market, check that out. I also have other things. I have this course here. This is where I put all the advanced communication skills I had to learn to climb the ladder, essentially up through management, and then eventually getting to be a CEO for what that's worth. You usually have to tack on various different skills when you sort of climb the ladder. When you go from worker level to, I've never really worked at a worker level in my professional career, but going from like frontline management to middle management to executive management, you sort of have to tack on a lot of different things. One of them is, the most important is things like people management skills. Another one is like financial skills. You got to be able to talk money, understand accounting and finance, stuff like that. And the third one is like very advanced communication skills, right? It's a totally different dynamic when you're an executive. For a start, you're essentially representing the organization publicly. You have to have very good communication skills, things that you wouldn't pick up if you were a worker or even a supervisor, So anyway, that stuff that I had to learn, what I did is I put them into this course, all the communication skills, I put it into that course. So if you're interested in learning that, what that can do is that can help make you a contender. If you're looking to climb the ladder, you'll have all the communication skills in place already. So you'll look like you have a lot more potential to move into these roles, right? And depending on what level you're at, you might have to still tack on like things like financial skills if you don't have those, but it's one less hurdle, right? So if that's what you're interested in, you want to learn that from me, check out that course. All of these have links in the description box below this live stream. You not only get a link to the course itself, but you get a link to a FAQ video I've done on each course. So in an effort to be as transparent as possible, it talks about how the course works, what you get, how it can help you, and all the details of that. It's sort of like getting you a glimpse into the course, so you can see what you're getting into, if you're considering taking it. So anyway, all of those things are linked. The other course, I don't think it would have as much interest here, but if you are interested in learning business, this is a great course that I created, Best Bang for the Buck Anywhere. It teaches you everything you would learn in a brick and mortar MBA, Masters of Business Administration. I have an MBA myself, for what that's worth, and what this is like a self-study thing. So you get the textbooks, the same textbooks you would be reading if you took this program in a brick and mortar university, using some of the best textbooks in the world that are used in places like Harvard Business School in their MBA program, and other prominent business schools like Stanford and stuff like that. And you're reading the same material. So you're getting all this. This stuff is in the public domain, the vast majority of this content. Okay, so you're just getting it. You can order the book off Amazon. And what I do is I provide you videos that sort of guide you through the whole thing. So that's that course if you're interested in either being an entrepreneur or learning how to make money, because that's what business is. It's the scientific study of how to make money. That's essentially what it is. If you want to learn that for its own sake, if you want to be an entrepreneur, or if you want to be more effective as a manager, this will help you. Okay, so if you're interested in that kind of thing, check that out. And I do different live streams every week. I do one on entrepreneurship. I do one on private equity. So I'm talking about, business type topics, where that's a little more relevant for people. But it can also help you in your career. That's a big part of it. Okay, where do we leave off here? Alex is going on about this machine or printed circuit boards or whatever you're talking about there. Syed says, sorry, I could not find that video on the channel. It will for it again. Thanks. Okay. Sorry, what video is that? Oh, like sell me this pen. Yeah, I haven't done a video on sell me this pen. That's not really what I talk about. I came up through operations. And quite frankly, I don't really care too much about that. I care more about helping job seekers, either people starting out with the posted job market or people trying to get into the world of networking to pursue management type roles and things like this. That's kind of what I ended up doing my YouTube channel on. So that's what I kind of stick with. I'm not a sort of general business channel. I could do that, but there's a lot of other people doing that, and there's less demand for it too, I find. Math Proof says how to dress for interviews to make a psychological impression and reveal aspects of your personality. Muscle shirts help. Artificial muscles, like it's like plastic muscles, that helps, right? Whether you're male or female. If you're female, if you dress like Wonder Woman, you can't go wrong. If you're a male, if you dress like Hulk Hogan, that has a certain presence, right? In the boardroom, and on the shop floor. It's all good. There's a couple of different strategies for that. A lot of people say dress for the position you're going for. Okay, that's not bad advice. Other people say dress one level up from what you're going for. That's not bad advice either. What I would say is, not everyone can do this, but if you're going for an interview at a larger organization where you can do a search for them online and you can do an image search. So you can go to Google and you can type in the name of the company and you click images so that it's like an image search. And you can see how the employees look at that company. I would also do that because, some companies, they're all in suits, like at a bank or whatever. Others, they're all in jeans and golf shirts. Others, they're all in overalls. And still others, they're in like t-shirts and things like that, and it really depends on the industry. And then within the industry, you got different cultures at different companies or different organizations. And you really don't know for a fact, like what you're walking into. So I would try that first. I would do like the Google image search for the company and see if you can find out what their employees look like, what they're dressed like. And then whatever you find, that's what you wear. So when you go down there, you look like one of them. You look like you belong there, okay? If they've all got like the sort of long lumberjack beard and the slicked back Vanilla Ice hair, like the whole lumber sexual thing, if they got that going, it's good to know that. If on the other hand, they all look like they work at a bank, they got the gelled spiky hair and, they're 21 years old in a 3-piece suit, that kind of stuff. It's good to know like what their kind of culture is, right? And if there's any doubt, talk to the person that you booked the interview through, whether it's the recruiter or the hiring manager. This is a reason to talk to them if you want one. And just say like, okay, so if I show up in sort of business casual or in a golf shirt or in jeans, is that okay? Or, what's the dress code? And just confirm with them. Okay? Like between all of those things, you should be able to not get it wrong. You know what I mean? Math Proof says, and by the way, thanks for answering the previous question. Your video is very interesting. In fact, well, thank you, Math Proofs. Do you do math proofs? I used to do that stuff like about 1 million years ago. There's the theorem and the corollary, right? All that kind of stuff. You prove it through mathematical induction and all this kind of thing. Really fun stuff, by the way. Really fun. It's so fun. I forgot every single thing I ever learned when it comes to that stuff. But I respect people who can do it. I had an acquaintance who got a PhD doing that kind of stuff. And, when I look at, he gave me a copy of his PhD thesis. It looks like a bunch of gobbledygook. I didn't know if these symbols are mathematics or Greek or Sanskrit or alien. I couldn't really tell. But it can really get out of hand. So if you can wrap your head around that, all the more power to you. I respect that. Okay, we don't seem to be getting a ton of extra questions. It's been 1 hour and 40 minutes, so I'm going to wrap this up. Check out my courses. I will be back very shortly, actually, in about 20 minutes on this channel with a different live stream, something called Honest HR Nitrous, where we talk about how job search goes from a practical perspective, not the theory, but a lot of the stupidity we see, a lot of the inefficiency and incompetence we see. So I'll be back on this channel with that. Until then, thanks for watching. I wish you nothing but the very best. Always remember, you're awesome. And I will be back this afternoon and on Friday if you do have any questions I can help you with. Until then, take care of yourselves. See ya.